All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the That's Not Real Trek Watch Party podcast. This is episode number 19. My name is Scotty, also known as EBC. Directly below me, the beautiful Short and Sweet, also known as Veronica. And we are already halfway through the very short 10 episode season of Strange New World Season 1. Um, and we're plugging along. So we only have 3 more weeks in this, including tonight, and then we will be moving on to something else. Simply because there is no more yet. It's the newest Star Trek series, and they only have season one. I can't imagine that there's going to be any problem. I don't think that they have announced yet, but they may have already announced that there's going to be a season two already.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
yeah, I'm lazy. I don't want to look it up, so you all can,
I'm working on
yeah,
it.
on it. Yeah, and the same thing with like they already confirmed that Picard is only going to have 3 seasons, and I believe they've already confirmed that Discovery is going to go into season 4 or season 5. Season 4 is out now, and Prodigy Lower Decks is going into season 3, and Prodigy into season 2. So all that's been confirmed. I would be I I would think that there's no doubt that they're going to do Strange New Worlds for a season 2 at least, because they it's been successful, at least as much as any other Star Trek series that they've been doing in the last couple of months here, or
Yeah,
years.
looks like they did confirm it and they have filmed it. So I'm guessing it's in post production now. It said filming was February to July
Oh,
of
okay.
this year. So it looks like it's probably in post production right now.
Okay. All right, so we're going to get started here with season 1, episode 5, Spock Amok, where we get to know T'Pring a lot better. Spock's betrothed, and they're going to revisit that whole thing, including the Khalifa. Not maybe that's it. Khalifa. No, maybe I'm mixing it up with something. Well,
Cauliflower?
the Vulcan battle with the axes, and yeah, the blood thing, and Spock getting his Ponfar on, and yeah. So all of that's going to be addressed in this, as they revisit the topic, and a lot of it is designed to be fan service in going back to this entire topic of Ponfar and Spock, and his relationship with T'Pring, as a method of fan service to go back to the original series, and how they visited it in a mock time. So, all right, here we go. All right. Well, that was an interesting episode.
On.
Yeah. And I don't know if you noticed, unless I'm completely wrong about this, it seems like that is the only episode in Trek history that I can recall that they were running 4 different storylines all at the same time. Because you had the body swap between Spock and T'Pring. You had the negotiations between Pike and this alien species. You had Number One and Noonien Singh doing Enterprise Bingo, and then they didn't dive into it too deep, but Nurse Chapel with what's her face, talking about this guy that she was either seeing or thinking of going back to or something. I didn't catch too much of that, but I don't recall a Star Trek episode where they actually did four different storylines like that.
Yeah, they made
Usually,
it work.
it's two or three.
Mhm.
I remember several with three, but that's the first time that I had seen something like that. So that was interesting. Um, and it seemed like they were definitely going with a comedic aspect for this entire episode. They made light of a lot of things, including the body swap, the mind swap thing. Uh,
Mhm.
so I found that really interesting. How did you feel about all of that?
I thought it was really well done, and I mean, there was kind of some parallels between the storylines, is like, just like role reversal type thing. You know, with Nurse Chapel being the one that doesn't want to get in the relationship and doesn't want to have the relationship talk. Normally it's reversed
Right.
in heterosexual relationships, and just kind of seemed like they were doing, number one, showing how she's fun and she was the good cop, and a lot of role reversal.
Yeah. Now that I didn't even notice that, but now that you mention it, yeah, that's a big part of it. Or even um, Enterprise Bingo being this thing that cadets and ensigns do, but here's two first officers doing
Yeah.
it. That I thought was fantastic the way they tied that in, especially when they're trying to shoot each other in the hallway. Uh, that I thought was pretty hilarious. That they're running through this whole thing because they never had before. Um, it was just not an aspect of them coming up through the ranks. Um, so yeah, a very very lighthearted episode. I think like they were trying to even Dr. Mabanga, with the slip of the tongue on the transporter pad. And then a little bit later they just showed this scene where he's like totally at peace doing his fishing. You
Yeah.
know, um, I thought they really did an excellent job of like um, putting that lightheartedness into every aspect of what was going on, even in negotiations.
Yeah.
Um, a Pike going in there to speak on behalf of Kirk or Spock, who was really T'Pring at the time, but
Right.
to he heard the words that T'Pring in Spock's body was saying that was kind of um, what's the word I'm looking for? Insinuating that she was disapproving of Spock and his career and how he was conducting himself and all that. And then he's like, "Yeah, no, you got it all wrong. Here's what it really is," and makes her see the light. So,
Well, I feel like maybe he knew without like putting it
oh, he
out there. I
did.
feel like maybe, oh, he did know.
Yeah,
Okay, maybe I missed it.
when he goes to get Spock from his quarters, they end up telling him.
Okay,
simply
okay, I
be
must have
simply
missed
because
that.
they didn't see like a way out of that situation, and they included him in the info. And then he's like, okay, and then T'Pring goes in posing as Spock anyway, so he knew
Okay.
about that.
Yeah, I was like, it really seems like he is
Yeah,
just trying to save the situation here.
right. um but yeah, that's interesting. And I also didn't see where the negotiations were going, where at the almost the beginning, when we first see these people, he's talking about how empathetic their people are, and that's not something that's well known about them. And then Pike puts two and two together and realizes that's what they're going to value at the end of the negotiation. Um, so I thought that was pretty interesting too, how they played out that whole storyline. It reminds me of an episode of Enterprise where Scott Bakula as captain comes in contact with this alien race that they only admire people that are completely and utterly rude to them. So then they go back and forth trading these insults, and they're like, "You greatly respect us, Captain, by insulting us so badly," you know.
That sounds like a funny episode.
Yeah, yeah, and it had a lot of the same types of comedic elements to it, you know, where they make light of all this. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Nurse Chapel, played by Jess Bush, I think is right at the top of my list. Favorite character on the show so far. Not only being the comic relief, but her one line zingers and just her whole worldview and outlook. I mean, she's a very positive person, always trying to look at, you know, what is going to be the best outcome for a situation, and a fearlessness. Like not she her courage is off the scale. She's the type of person that is not going to let anything intimidate her, and then she uses that to her benefit to be the best version of herself. And I really really like that about her. I like the way that Jess Bush is playing the character, and you know, pulling that entire personality off. What did you think of that?
Oh yeah, I think she's a great character, and I think that they really kind of had just like an open drawing board with her.
Hmm.
You know, from Nurse Chapel from the original series, there wasn't like much character development or
Right.
really like a personality that they really went into, so they could go wherever they wanted, and I think they made just probably the best choice doing it this way.
Right. The only thing I can think of, keeping in mind that I probably haven't done a watch through of the original series in maybe 8 years or so, Nurse Chapel, as played by Michelle Barrett, was seemed to be a very sympathetic, empathetic person. You know, which I think they were just trying to like say this is a nurse, and this is what we want to see embodied in a nurse.
Hmm.
But then Jess Bush takes the character and adds on the snark and
Yeah.
the that courage and ambition, and yeah, it takes it to a whole new level. So I really like that. Um, do you have any other thoughts on Dr. Mabanga's character? Because I don't know how I should feel about him.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of at the beginning of the episode thought maybe he was going to stay on the ship and just like hang out with his holo or not holographic daughter, but his trapped in the trapped in the teleport daughter.
Transport, yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
know, words are hard.
it's almost like she's a frozen dinner,
Yeah.
and he brings her out every once in a while to thaw her out a bit.
Yeah, so I was kind of surprised that he actually left the ship because I was like, oh, maybe this would be like a good opportunity. The ship's empty, um, for the most part,
Right.
that he could hang out and have some time with his daughter. But then he took off, and he's just like, ah, nah, nah,
Yeah,
she'll be there.
she'll be fine in suspended animation. We'll find a cure soon. You know.
Yeah, but other than that, I don't really have a read on him just yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. He seems like,
Mm.
you know, as a doctor, he's very compassionate, and you know, obviously, like in the last episode, he was doing the blood transfusion with number one. Um, so clearly, as a medical professional, he is doing his best to put himself on the line for his patients and have that empathy. Um, but I don't know. I haven't done a lot of research on the gentleman that plays Dr. Mabanga, but uh, it's an interesting personality that he's relaying through this acting job, and I don't know quite yet how to feel about it. I don't know if I like it or dislike it or don't think it's enough, or I don't know. I got to think more
Yeah.
about it.
I feel like they haven't really done. I mean, they've done a little bit of character work with him, but more so with most of the other characters. And from what I see, is his compassion and then his ambition, because he was talking about the ointment or the salve that he was using being like,
Right.
eventually this is going to be standard practice, and he wants to cure his daughter's illness, and his ambition is clearly something that is deeply ingrained in him.
And then we
But
never
other
heard
than
about
that,
it again.
yeah.
Now, I can tell you that is an aspect of Star Trek that harkens back to Enterprise as well, because they made it a huge plot point in Enterprise. I can't think of his name right now. The kid that played Ralphie in Christmas Story.
Okay.
He grew up and was still acting, but he's not that well known. Well, he ended up playing Dr. Phlox, the ship's medical officer in Enterprise. Peter
I
Billingsley, there
did
you go.
not ever put those two together.
Yeah,
Huh.
and uh, they made it a huge, yeah. Dr. Phlox is Ralphie, and he did not ever get his shotgun, the Red Rider or whatever, blah blah blah.
Get his eyes shot out.
Yeah, but they made it a huge plot point in Enterprise that Dr. Phlox, who was not a member of Starfleet, was taken on board and became the medical officer that traveled with the crew for the whole 4 seasons. And they made it this huge plot point that he as somebody who was not a member of Starfleet and not even human, his race is Denobulan. They made it this point that all of his treatments for the medical issues were very things that were unconventional. For instance, like if somebody had an actual flesh wound, he'd take his osmotic eel and set it on the wound because that was the best thing for cauterizing wounds, in his opinion. You know,
Ugh.
so that aspect of it, where he's like, yeah, we're gonna take this eel paste and we're gonna smear it on your forehead, and then that's gonna cause your chakras to transfer. That was the first thing I thought of, was the unconventional medical treatments in Enterprise. Yeah. So that was interesting. One more point before we move on, unless you had anything else. I'm seeing a very, very distinct episodic nature to this season. I don't know how far that's going to go, but so far I'm not really seeing any type of serious season arc.
Yeah, I mean, they mentioned at the beginning, like, oh, yeah, we just had this encounter with the Gorn, but it was literally, that was it. And then
Right,
this is like entirely encapsulated in this one episode. And then I'm imagining we're just going to move on and have some other thing
right.
going on.
So they're definitely referencing things from other episodes. Like you said at the beginning, you've got Spock's personal log where he's talking about what they just went through in the last episode with the Gorn. But so far, 5 episodes in, I'm not seeing any type of season long story arc like was so prevalent in Discovery. And even when we get back to Discovery after Picard and start season 3 of Discovery, the same thing happens. And they do this season long story arc. They did that in Enterprise. They visited some of that in Deep Space Nine, and even a little bit in Voyager. I'm not seeing it here at all.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that what the creators were doing with Strange New Worlds was definitely trying to get back to that encapsulated episodic nature that was so very prevalent in the original series and TNG.
Hmm.
Um, so do you see that as a positive or a negative
Oh, I think it's a
overall?
definite good thing. I think they're trying to diversify, and the people that have problems with the if maybe they don't want an overarching arc and they don't want to have to watch every single episode, then they've got this show over here where you don't have to watch every single episode. You can hit
Right.
it, you can hit it when when and if you want. Um, but yeah, I like it. I think it adds to just the universe and the options overall.
Right. Well, and it also shows us that not only are the creators capable of that, but it seems like that's what they're aiming for with the episodic nature is we're going to begin a storyline and then wrap it up in 50 minutes. So, everything that our characters just went through in this episode that may be referenced later, but that storyline is now done and they're going to move on from it. Almost like creature of the week feature where we're going to visit this aspect of it and tell a really great story in one episode, but then we're not really going to visit it again, you know. So I find that really interesting, and I would say it's a positive as well that they do have that difference between the ones that have come before where that's what they were aiming for was a season long story arc or even a several episode story arc, and then this very staccato episodic nature. So, all right, anything that I missed before we move on?
No.
Okay. All right, then our second episode is episode 6, Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach. Here we go. Very interesting. Yeah. Man, that okay, so first impression. Now, first of all, I didn't know, like I thought I could see certain things in the story on where it was going after a while, and we were talking about that in the chat, okay, so maybe this is what's going on here and all that. By the end, I didn't expect that at all. I mean, I saw it coming like maybe 5-10 minutes before the end of the episode, um, but it was a very unexpected ending given how it began.
Definitely. A
And
big shift in tone.
right, right. Um, and then by the end of the episode, I was going, you know what? This is Star Trek at its finest. And that is taking something that is something that humans grapple with and have a really, really hard time coming up with a solution and presenting it in this scenario where in this case, the Enterprise crew with Captain Pike are facing this species that does things a certain way, and you saw at the end there, his initial reaction was disgust and hatred at what the society does until she started explaining it from their viewpoint, and he's just, I mean, he was still like that, but you could see the wheels turning in his head as he considered how she was rationalizing it and justifying it. So what did you see in the whole scenario that was presented within the storyline?
Yeah, I definitely thought it was interesting that they went this far. I mean, they went pretty far. You don't really see kids being hurt that much in Star Trek. And then going behind it all and her saying, we've tried to find another solution and we just can't. We haven't. So I thought that they pushed the boundaries definitely with what the storyline normally is with those types of situations.
Yeah. um, I've also seen, like, maybe in some of these types of storylines where they claim that they haven't been able to find any other solutions, and maybe they really haven't tried as hard as you would hope, or looked at it from maybe a different viewpoint. So when she said that line, I was kind of like, maybe. um,
Yeah.
but but still, there, man, that line she had about how can you tell me that there aren't children that are suffering in your society?
Mhm.
And the answer is no. Even
Right.
even in modern, Star Trek era, where money's been abolished and people work towards the betterment of humanity and exploration and all that, there's still children that suffer.
Mhm.
And yeah, well, let me see if I can remember the exact wording on it. That part where she goes, um, we see it or we acknowledge it, and that's the difference between us, is that you may not see the suffering of the children in your society, but we see it and we embrace it. I think is how she said it. But that was the whole point, was that they, as a society, they amalgamated children suffering into one child suffering on behalf of all the others, and therefore they claim it's an honor. And the child, well, that child in particular was okay with it until the actual moment, and then you could see the
Yeah.
fear on his face, and he certainly wasn't joy and gratitude.
You're
um,
right.
but man, that really strikes deep at this concept of, what do we do as a society to stop suffering? I mean, that was the whole concept of the episode: lift us where suffering cannot reach. And this is how that society did that, and how they chose to try to end suffering around the planet by consolidating it into one person who handled it for everybody.
Right.
And man, that just, it's these types of Star Trek episodes that I genuinely love with all my heart, because they take some kind of sociological or political aspect or something like that, and break it down in a way that you've probably never even considered, and show you a side of it that you've probably never even considered. Um, so that, this to me is probably, at least so far, we're 6 episodes in out of 10 so far. Fabulous, the best episode, probably only seconded by the last one. Um, but yeah, that I now I have to go back and rewatch it, and
Yeah.
look at the Easter eggs and see, whatever else is there. Just like season one of Discovery. Now that you know that Lorca is from the Mirror Universe, you go back to see all the little clues.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, man, I'm almost flabbergasted and spellbound by this episode.
Yeah.
What else did you see there?
Well, I mean, it even ties like the overarching theme about the child suffering even ties into the Mbenga storyline because
Right.
they're, his child is technically probably suffering, she's cooped up in a pattern buffer. She knows
Al-
that
al-
she's
Almost being held prisoner.
yeah, she knows that she's there, and like that little bit of joy that she gets from like just getting to come out and play with another kid. Like
Right.
you don't think about like the fact that she probably hasn't got to do that in who knows how
Right.
long. We don't know how long that he's had her cooped up in there. Or maybe they did discuss it, but it's been ages, I'm sure. And it's like, wow, it's kind of incredible how they tie those two storylines together. And then, at the end, the boy on the planet, obviously a bad end, like there's no happy ending there, but then there's like this little glimmer of hope for Mabenga's daughter there. So yeah, really, really good storytelling.
And very very strong, very, like, there's no doubt as to what they were trying to convey in this storyline, and they did it
Mhm.
magnificently. um, but as you were saying in the chat, if Mabanga's daughter ends up not making it,
Oh.
we're gonna riot.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be like, I mean, just it would be a bold move. It would be a bold move for the writers
That's true.
to go that dark, I think. Who knows? Maybe they will.
So maybe the worry and the concern we would have as the fan watching this over what the end result is going to be with Mabenga's daughter was kind of, I don't want to say simplified, but transitioned to almost this child who, of course, is part of this episodic thing. We're not going to revisit the Magellans, but at least not anytime soon. But we know that that was the potential thing that could occur with Mabanga's daughter, and it didn't happen to Mabanga's daughter. It happened to this other child who we started to have feelings for because of his brilliance and his educational qualities, and the way he articulated himself and the connection he had with Spock, and all of these things. We were starting to feel something for this kid, and then they turn it into, um, not even necessarily a tragedy, but, you know, here's this thing that you never really expected was coming with this storyline until all the pieces fell in there and you see the whole picture as to what the society is like, and how it compares with humanity and how we have handled things over our history. You never necessarily get as good of a chance to examine the decisions that humanity has made in reference to these sorts of scenarios, and how we handle it and what our reasoning and rationalizations are, and that gets to be explored in this storyline that could only happen in Star Trek.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you're never going to see this type of a storyline in Star Wars,
No.
or anything else like that. This to me was quintessential Star Trek at its best,
Hmm.
taking a storyline like that and kind of laying bare for the audience what the choices are, and it's never clear in the beginning, and then it becomes very stark, very bright as to just how wrong things could go if we make the wrong choices. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so absolutely beautiful. My hats are off to everybody that had a hand in this particular episode. And I'm definitely going to have to watch it again, and I'm probably even going to do some more research too, on if this species has ever been visited before. I don't think so. I don't recall the name, but there's potential for that sort of thing. One of the websites that I somewhat frequent is Memory Alpha and Memory Beta, because they're great databases on all things Star Trek, and I might be able to find some more information on the Magellans and how that all played out, especially considering that this is just a couple of years before the original series. So we'll see. But yeah, now I am entirely intrigued by the scenario. So yeah, good stuff. All right. So we did have a little bit of a sub story in there, and that was Uhura going through continuing education as a cadet, and now she's working in security. And of course, just so happens to be the one that figures all this shit out. And yeah, and almost by chance, like something
Right.
about data tapes or something that need to be manually translated, and she comes across the information, which is that this other colony on a very inhospitable world is more than likely an offshoot of the Magellans themselves, and that this was not something that was disclosed to Starfleet or Captain Pike or anybody else. And all of that being part of the big reveal and the lead up to the tragedy. So, what did you think of like how they intertwined Uhura's part in this into the storyline?
It was cool. I think they could have used any character to do this, except that she knows all the languages, so
Right.
that made sense. They made it work for the story.
How
Um,
convenient, you know.
yeah, she's the whiz of all of the different 47 or however many she knows.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I thought that was cool that and it got a little more screen time and a little more character development for her because this one was real heavy on like they're off planet, they've got the love interest. You really didn't see a lot of many other characters. Some of them you didn't see at all. Hammer again we didn't see. He wasn't in this one either, was he? I don't think he had a scene.
Right.
um and probably a few others just didn't even have scenes.
Yeah, we didn't
So
see Hemmer this episode either.
mhm.
Um, and I got to imagine, simply because of Uhura's presence in the original series and how they made it a big point in this series to have her as a main character, and who is going to be casting her and how that role is played in the new series in comparison with the original series. I have to imagine that if not in these last four episodes of season one, at some point in season two, they're going to dive deep into Uhura's backstory and character and all that. Um, we did get a few glimpses in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek 2009 of Uhura's backstory because they were portrayed as cadets in that film. And she was kind of portrayed not only as a linguistic genius, but also as um, somebody who did the same kind of thing that Avery Brooks did as Cisco in DS9, and that is to represent the qualities and the history and the presence of African Americans. And so it seems like they're definitely going to have to at some point build that into what this is supposed to be representative of, and that is her character, almost a coming of age to the point where then she is the reliable communications officer on the Enterprise under Kirk's Enterprise command, and what that's going to mean to the future of the storyline that we already know is coming. And I think they're definitely going to want to flesh her out and show not only her backstory but what she is truly capable of, until the point at which Captain Pike leaves and Captain Kirk takes over.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it seems like they're kind of going back and forth a little bit with how they're featuring characters. I mean, Pike is always there. We've had focus on almost every single other character. we had a little bit of explanation as to Hemmer and who he is and what he does, but we haven't had an episode yet that entirely focuses on him. And same with what's her face, Erica, the
Ortega's, yeah.
helmswoman.
Hmm.
Um, so that and the I don't even know the character's name next to her, the Asian woman, because it seems like they only show her on screen when they're doing a bridge scene, and it's like, okay, this is her position, she's supposed to be here, responding to captain or whatever else is going on. uh, so I'm actually looking forward as well to that. Ortegas, Erica Ortegas is the Holmes person. Um, so yeah, those three in particular, Hemmer, Ortegas, and whoever plays the ops position next to Ortegas, um, the fleshing out of those characters. But I have to assume that at some point they're gonna really dive deep into Uhura's character, um, just because they made it such a point to include her and show that this is kind of like her origin story, almost, because we never saw any of that with the original series and where they all came from. It just kind of plopped you down into the action.
Hmm.
um, yeah, so we'll see. And I think at some point they're also going to have to address the elephant in the room, which is how Captain Pike gets to his demise. Um, and I don't know that they would necessarily do that at the end of season one, because at the very least I could tell you this, in my research of the timeline, Captain Pike's uh, captaincy ends in 2264. And I think currently we're in 22. I want to say 2259,
Okay.
2260, somewhere in that general region. So
Hmm.
as far as I could tell, he's got a couple of years where his captaincy keeps going through the first 5 year mission of the Enterprise, and then Kirk takes command in 2265. So we do have some more time with this. I got to imagine that they're not necessarily going to address that elephant in season one, and maybe that's going to be the kind of thing that wraps up the whole series after a while. And they say, okay, let's say we have 3 seasons or 4 seasons. At the end of whatever the last season is, that's going to be the clincher
Yeah.
to move him into position for this fate that we know is coming.
Hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. But
Yeah, for
uh,
sure.
in any case, 11 out of 10 stars for this episode, man. I am thoroughly impressed, and I'm
Yeah.
loving this so far. Right? So, what would you rate this episode in particular, and the series as a whole so far?
Oh yeah. I mean, the this episode was definitely a 10 of 10, and really, I really like this series. This is probably going to end up being. I mean, unless something really, really goes wrong, this will probably end up being one of my favorite series.
Uh, Almost as good as TNG, not quite.
My heart is always with TNG, but
Right.
it might be second. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, who would have thunk it
Hmm.
that all these years later that they came up with something? Yeah, fuck you, Cage, with DS9. Jesus Christ. Um, who'd have thunk it? All these years later, they would have come up with something to rival TNG,
Yeah.
the thing that we grew up with and that is so near and dear to our hearts, and the
Hmm.
characters that we identified with, as hokey as some of the episodes had been. That's always going to be the favorite series. Just
Hmm.
like original series was probably my dad's favorite thing, because that's what he grew up with and that's what he really knew. and
Mm,
he's not so keen on newer Star Trek. Uh,
right.
I think I'm at this point. I'm going to suggest to him to see Strange New Worlds because it really, in my mind, does capture the essence of Star Trek, and not only the original series, but the things that made all of the subsequent series great, um, as a form of entertainment and storytelling. So, all right. And to be fair, I don't think that's something that Discovery has really done either. Discovery is
Hmm.
cool in its own right, and it has a very
Hmm.
distinct storytelling style, but I don't think it ever really captured Star Trek in its essence like Strange New Worlds has.
So you're saying it wasn't real Trek?
Uh, I'm saying it's real Trek, but it's not great Trek. Let's put it that way. Yeah, you ain't gonna catch me with that bullshit. Sorry. No. Yeah, I maintain that the only Trek that's not real Trek is the motion picture because that's just a pile of shit. So, all right. So that pretty much wraps it up. Next week, episode 20. We're looking at season 1, episode 7, called The Serene Squall, and episode 8, The Elysian Kingdom. So we will continue Strange New Worlds and figure all this shit out, and maybe understand why Spock is not doing so hot with the pring these days. Something like that. All right. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.